So I want to start off this episode by talking about Mazi Smith. So the reports coming out of Cowboys training camp is that Mazi Smith has struggled so far throughout this training camp. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm pretty close to being out on Mazi Smith. This is a guy who has not shown improvement ever since he walked through the door and became a Cowboy. All throughout the course of training camp, you're hearing that they're trying to work on his technique, and yet he's making the same mistake over again. You see some of the tape that's come out from some of these practices. It feels like he's always on the ground, even though there are some good reps in there, and I'll give him credit for it. But at the same time, you are a first-round draft pick. You are a guy that, the front office has a lot of expectations for. You're a guy that they invested in. I would expect you to make a few good plays. However, Mazi Smith so far has been a disappointment, and I don't see him being what the Cowboys thought he was going to be even just this offseason come week one. And I'm going to be honest with you. If there's not real improvement from Mazi Smith, I would be for the Cowboys moving on from him, whether that be trading him, whether that be releasing him. If he is a guy that is not good enough to be on this roster, he should not be on this roster, even if he was a first-round pick. You're hearing reports coming out of training camp that Justin Rogers has been better than Mazi Smith. And that's a guy who the Cowboys just drafted in the 7th round. He is a guy who is around the same age as Mazi Smith. I don't know what exact age he is, but he's a guy that just got drafted this past year that looks like he might have some promise to him. And it seems like he's further ahead in his development than Mazi Smith. So I'm close to being out on Mazi Smith. I'm not 100% out, but at the same time, I wasn't overly optimistic about Mazi Smith. I think there's going to be a take that people try and come at me with where you said, oh, well, you see here, you said if he would have been decent, this defense would be really good. Well, yeah, but I didn't say he was going to be that. I just said if he is that, this defense is going to be really good. Unfortunately, Mazi Smith has not proven that he could be a decent player, even just what we've seen so far in training camp. He has underwhelmed so far throughout training camp. And I understand the injury that he had, it did hinder him when it came to off-season training. And I understand that there was weight that needed to be put back on from the previous regime and, what they decided their vision was going to be for Mazi Smith. I understand that there are things that have gotten in the way of Mazi Smith being the player that maybe the Cowboys hoped he would have been coming out of Michigan. However, when you're hearing stories coming out of camp that he's making the same mistake over and over again when they're trying to teach him technique, that's a problem. When you're hearing that Carl Davis is having a better training camp than Mazi Smith, that is a problem. This guy is not a starting caliber defensive tackle at the current moment. Now, I'm not saying he won't be that. Maybe he does become that somewhere down the line. But at the current moment with the Cowboys, the way they are right now, where they are a team that could compete for a Super Bowl, they still have enough talent on the roster. They still have the core pieces from previous years. 3 guys, and I understand it's the NFL top 100 and whatever you want to think about it. But they have 3 guys ranked in the top 20. They have a really good team here. So if you are a team that is competing for a Super Bowl, you need to make the smart move and at the very least go get a guy like Linval Joseph, who is not a world beater, but he's at least decent. He's going to be better this year than what Mazi Smith will be this year. I have legitimate concerns about Mazi Smith. And I know there's people who make excuses for pretty much every player on this team for their lack of performance. But guys, this is fair. He has not shown enough to pretty much everybody over there at training camp that he has made the requisite amount of improvement that he needed to make to feel comfortable with this guy being the starting defensive tackle this year. And I understand why they're trying really hard to improve Mazi Smith because they spent a first-round draft pick on him. However, it has been, we're starting to see now that, hey, maybe that first year wasn't just, hey, Dan Quinn telling Mazi Smith to just lose a bunch of weight. Maybe there was more there that we should be concerned about with Mazi Smith other than what Dan Quinn and his regime wanted to do with him. But when it comes to him being a first-round pick, that's the reason why he's going to make this team ultimately. But if I'm Will McClay and I'm looking at the performance that Mazi Smith has had so far during training camp, I'm saying, like, look, I'll wear it. It was a bad decision by me to fight for Mazi Smith. However, we need to move on from this guy because he's not good enough. It's going to hinder our football team, and we would be better served with somebody on our team that is not Mazi Smith. Because if you're telling me right now that the Cowboys could have Linval Joseph and Justin Rogers be their one techniques for this upcoming season, I'm cool with that. I would be fine with moving on from Mazi Smith. It's bad. It's not good. But that's fine. This happens to every team. Missing on a first round pick happens to every team. But, the devil's advocate to that is with the way the Cowboys build their roster and rely on the draft so much, you can't afford to miss in the first round. But the fact of the matter is you did here with Mazi Smith. Now, I shouldn't say you did 100% because we do have to wait and see how he performs in preseason games. And once we get in the regular season, maybe, very unlikely. But that's why I would say I'm about 97% out on Mazi Smith. There's a little bit there to where, hey, if I see the requisite amount of improvement that he needs to make, then maybe, I would like to explore that option. And it is still very early in training camp, and we do have to give him the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that. He is coming off that injury. There are things that got in the way here. But overall, Mazi Smith has not proven that he is one of the two best one techniques on this team, according to reports. And it seems like this room is pretty light as it is at defensive tackle. So if he can't be a top 5 player in this room, because if that's true that he's the third best one technique behind Osa and Carl Davis, you have guys like Osa and Chauncey Golston as well. I'm sorry, did I say Osa at one technique? I meant Justin Rogers. If you're telling me that Justin Rogers, Carl Davis, Osa, and Chauncey Golston are the best defensive tackles on this team, and he's like the 5th best defensive tackle, how many defensive tackles are you going to carry is my question. And, if you bring in a Linval Joseph, I still think you need to go add another 3 technique. I still believe you need to do that. And Mazi Smith doesn't play 3 technique. So it's really interesting to see what the Cowboys are going to do here. But, I'm close to being out on Mazi Smith, and that's my take on this whole situation. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully Mazi Smith starts to turn it around. But right now I'm not going to bet on that.